Okay, now that we have finished this very bare bones, simple example, classic example about the builder pattern, let me just go back 1 second to the hardware director. And remember when I said that the builder methods like ADHD or ADRAM are methods that perform chaining? Well, what I meant is that, as you can see, they're not void methods. They actually return an instance of the builder itself. So what happens is that we can, instead of calling it this way, we can call this method in a slightly more elegant form, like this. And so we can say add this, add that, and configure this without having to repeat all the time the reference to the builder object. Now here, of course, it does a very small difference, but you can imagine that if you have a lot of these methods, then the difference is much more important. And it's even more important if instead of having the creation of the object like this encapsulated inside a method, I actually end up using the builder in different places in different ways. And so sometimes I'll call like 3 or 4 methods, some other times I'll call other methods, and I just don't want to repeat all the time the same reference to builder. And I also like the idea of having some kind of fluent and readable and predictable API. So to illustrate this idea, let me create another little example on the builder pattern, and through this I'll create another directory and call it adventurer, because this will be the subject of our creation for this new little toy example. So let's go and create an adventurer then. Class. So there we go. Adventurer. Okay, I got my nice little adventurer. And just let me paste these few lines. The idea is that, well, first of all, let's give it, let's create an unknown that will be sex for this guy. And we'll say male, female, and why not undecided. Just to leave space for the unknown. And let's say that our adventurer has some stats. We will create this class shortly. As a name, as some hit points. That means how many life points he has before he ends his life. And of course he has this sex. And stats will be just a very simple class, you know, the classic role-playing game stats like intelligence, dexterity, and stuff like that. Actually, let's create it right now so we get it out of the way. Let's do it like this, which is more fun. So generate type a new file. I think it's what I want. And let's go and say that these stats for now are intelligence and strength. So public and strength. So now we have our stats. Let's keep it very simple, and let's go back to our adventure. Another thing that you might have noticed is that I created the constructor as private, and this is because since I decided that it's actually the case of using a builder to create adventure, I don't want to even allow the creation of adventurers by passing my builder. And the only way I can do this is to make this constructor private. But then, how the heck are we going to create new adventurers? Well, the solution, there's actually a solution, because if I want the builder to be the class responsible for creating the adventurer, then all I have to do is create builder as internal classes of the class adventurer. So my builder, or my builders actually, because you see I will have more than one, will be defined as internal classes of the class adventurer. And it's very simple, we'll see it in a few seconds. But then, how are we going to interact this with these builders if they are internal classes of the class adventurer? Well, they could be public, or I could use an interface and interact with this builder through an interface. Of course, the interface approach will give me more flexibility, and while the concrete class will make things much simpler. But then if I want to have the option of changing builder, it's probably best to take the way of using interfaces. So let's create an interface for an adventure builder. Let's go with new item, interface, and let's call it just adventurer builder. There we go. Spelling right? Yes, I think so. And this interface will say that what can we do? We want to give it a name, and I call the method with name because I'm making an effort to create a fluent interface. So I'll say with name, and this will take a string name. But what will be the type return from this method? Well, I said I want a fluent interface, so I want to enable method chaining, so I will return the same type, so that this method in the end can return this, that is, the same instance on which it was invoked. And then, having this, I guess we can say that we want to configure and initialize the sex of the adventurer. There we go. Also the AKP, right? So let's copy this and say that with HP, and this is going to be an int type, so int HP. Okay, so we have defined our basic interface adventurer builder, but we have to add one last method. There will be the final method that will give back the adventure that we are trying to build. So there we go. This is the base interface, shall we say, and you will notice that for now I didn't really care about the stats class, because we will care about that aspects with another builder, which we call adventurer stats builder. So now let's go and give an implementation to this guy. So we're going to create a class, and we're going to call it adventurer builder impl. And I know this name is very ugly with the impl in the end, but you see, we won't use this name very often because it will be a class that is going to be hidden from view. And in fact, this class is not going to be created like this, because, as I said before, we're going to have this class as an internal class of my adventurer class. So what I'll do is this. I'll say that inside the class adventurer, I'll define this private class adventurer builder impl, which implements adventurer builder. There we go. And let's go and make the compiler happy. Implement the interface. So what we have here? Well, of course, we will have a private adventurer. We will call it data for reason that will be let's call it adventurer. Okay, and I guess we can initialize it right here. And you'll see that since I'm inside the adventurer class, I'm free to call the constructor adventure, even if it's private. Very good. And actually, now I'm the only class that can do that. So build is pretty easy because this is going to just return my adventurer. So let's say return adventurer. There we go. Boom. And as for Adventure Builder with HP, well, that's pretty easy as well, because all I'm going to do is to say adventurer dot hit points is equal to the parameter that I got in input, and then of course as promised I have to say return this. And then with name is going to be, of course, very similar. So adventurer, your name will be name, and return this. And sex is not going to be very different. Adventurer.sex. Now he or she has a sex. There we go. And return this, of course. Perfect. So, again, just stay with me and pretend that these initializations are not actually this simple, but are a little bit more complex than just assigning a property. If you remember, I told you that there's a smarter way to do simple assignment than this, but I will show you in the context of working with the stats class. Because now what I can do is, let me recapitulate a little bit. Now I have my class adventurer, I have the private inner class adventurer builder imp, and then of course I have my interface adventure builder. Now what I want to do is to give a way to the adventurer to expose an internal object of this kind so that it can be used elsewhere. And I can do it pretty easily if I do something like this and say, let's say that this adventurer, and say that this adventurer as a new property that's of type adventurer builder, and we will call it for a reason that will become clear later, just create, and this is gonna return a new instance of this guy down there. So adventurer builder imp. There we go. And here I've just used this new syntax that allows me to create a getter property just with an arrow and the thing that I'm returning. I could use a standard get, but just shorter. And I want to show you this as well. So now, if I go back to my program and for now just forget about all this and comment it out. What do I have now? Well, actually, if I go back to Adventure, if you're smart and smarter than me, probably have realized that this is not good, because if I cannot create an adventure, I cannot call this property right now. So what I need to do is use the keyword static. So now this property is available directly on the class adventure. So let's go back to the main method, and we say now we have an adventurer. Great. And we should also, of course, using his namespace, adventurer we call link equals what? Well, if I say adventurer, now I can use that create property that I was discussing before, and then on this guy here I can use other methods, like for example with name and say, okay, you're going to be called Link Snowball in honor of famous, well, not so famous actually, video game hero. And then I'll say with sex.male, and with HP, let's give the guy 100 life point, and then we say build. There we go. So now you see with this Fluent interface and method chaining how easy it is to create my adventure and choose exactly what I want to initialize in a very clear and meaningful way. So this is not too bad, but let's recall that we have also the stats of adventure to take care of. And if you recall, we have this class stats that now is populated only with intelligence and strength. But let's imagine that the adventure that we're building is a class that's so complex that actually one single builder might not be enough. So we might want to have more builders specializing on building different parts of our adventure. Maybe one for its basic characteristics, and then one for the stats, and then maybe one for equipment and weapons, and so on. So what we want to do, what we need is another builder, and since our builder are implementation of interfaces, the first thing that we need is an interface. So let's recall that the first interface that we got is here, and it's called Adventure Builder. And now we're going to have another one, and we will call it something like I guess something like Adventure Stats Builder. There we go. And the first thing is that obviously this interface will be an extension of our first one. So this will be an adventure builder. So we will have all the same methods declaration as the other, and then we will add another one. And here, I guess you're expecting something like one method to assign intelligence and one method to assign strength. But then, for these stats, I imagine that we really are going to have just a bunch of integer quantities, and all we're going to do is setting them. It would be very repetitive and quite boring to have all these different methods that basically do just the same thing, but with a different property. Is there a better way? Yes, of course there is. So what I will add here is this method, and this method looks complicated, but it's not actually so complicated. It returns an instance of the class implementing Adventure Stats Builder, and that's exactly on the same line of what we have been doing all around. It will be called assign, just because I think it's a reasonable name, and it's a generic method. This generic method will specialize on a particular property. That's why I call this generic parameter tprop. And what it will take in input is an expression. An expression is a representation of a function. And so we can, with an expression, we can actually go inside expression and see what expression is doing. And for example, if this expression is working with a property name, we can get that property name and make use of it. And you see what I mean when we are going to implement this function. So this is an expression that represents a function that takes an adventurer as input, and as output it returns a t properties. So it's one of its properties. So it's basically a selector, basically the kind of function that you use when you do queries on link, and for example you do an order by, and you need a selector to know which property you're going to use to do the ordering, for example. And then this value is pretty obvious what it means. It's just a value that we want to assign to the property, for example to intelligence or to dexterity. So what we have to do now is, we have to go and implement this method, And so we go into class adventure, and of course now the compiler is not happy anymore because we missed the implementation of this new method. Boom! Here is the skeleton of the method, and now we have to do a little magic, because the idea is that the first parameter we're going to get in this method is something like this. It's a lambda expression that would say what kind of property we want to implement. And for example, for our adventure, if we go and look at our adventure, we see that we want to go and work with the stats of the adventure. So it will be something like a.stats.intelligence, for example. As you see, this is kind of lambda we're gonna get, and what we're interested in is to get this at this property, so that we can they're actually able to set it. So what we want to do here is something like this. We need to have information about the property, so we have to pass through a class that's called property info. Property info is in namespace system.reflection, so you have to import a namespace if you're not already done so. And property info, we call it property, not property, but property. And how are we going to get to this? We are going to get to this through this stat selector, through the expression that we're going to get as first parameter. So what we're going to do is say, okay, stat selector, let's see what I can do with you. Well, I can get to your body, and I happen to know that this body is a member expression. So I can cast it to member expression, and then once that I've done this cast, I can get to his member property, and this is the property that I'm hunting, that I'm after. Only I have to cast it as a property info to make my assignment legal. There we go. Now, this will get at the property that I need. What I need to do now is to invoke that property and set it to the value that I've been passed here with that parameter value. So what I need to do is say something like this: property dot set value. And as you see, as a first parameter, I have to see, okay, I want to pass my adventurer. Actually, not my adventurer, but adventurer.stats, because that's the object on which I'm setting the property, and then I'm just saying to what value I'm trying to set this property. And then, as usual, I just do return this. Perfect. So now I've implemented my second builder, my faceted builder, and I have to connect the two. I'll add a new method to my base interface and say, okay, when you want to get a specialized builder for the stats, and so you want to get back this guy, an adventure stats builder, you're gonna just invoke a property that's called stats, which will have only a get expression. And then, if I go to my implementation, I'll go and just say that, oops, where is it? There we go. And in my adventure builder imp, I'll say that when you invoke stats, all we're gonna do is to return a new implementation of our specialized builder, to which, of course, we're going to pass our adventurer. And of course, this works perfectly nice, because when we work stats, we will pass to this new faceted builder the same instance that the object of the base class was working with, because this is a reference type. Watch out, if you were working with value types, things would be messier, because we will have to deal with the problem of object copying. But if you work with the reference object, this is perfectly clean. So now we have all the pieces in place, and I'm finally ready to show what all this work brought us. If we go back to our program, Now we can try and say, okay, after we set the basic properties, if we need to go on and set the specialized properties as well, I could do something like this and invoke the stats property, and then start worrying about the assignment of the various characteristics. And so I could say dot assign, and then here, as I was saying before, all you need to do is to pass a lambda that says, for example, a.stats.intelligence. Let's see what problem we got here. Oh yes, of course, we forgot to say at what level we want to set our intelligence. That was not very intelligent to forget this. And then again, for dexterity, it's the same old story. So stats.dexterity. No, we didn't have dexterity. We'd have strength though, I guess. And we set it at 70. There we go. And as you see, this is much cleaner than passing strings. So now we can give this a try and see if we get what we were expecting. Let's go. And let's go see this guy, if he has all, yes, he has names right, points right, and let's go see the stats. And the stats are just exactly as we expect.